So here we are in our Flaskr tutorial, and we've already covered project layout and application setup. But before we move on to define and access the database, I wanted to do a brief review. The project layout mentions an installation instructions, and there's also a Quickstart mentioned in the introduction files. And there are some important points here that we should discuss. First, installation. The installation process mentions a virtual environment. In this tutorial is venv. Once you've initiated it, you have to activate it. Other people recommend pipenv as a virtual environment. This tutorial is using .venv, and then you just run pip install Flask. And then once you have Flask installed, if you want to see this tutorial Hello World app running in a browser, you have to run a Flask command. Now this is the basic Flask command. You just flask --app hello run, and it will run it in a localhost server for you. And the default is running on 5000. However, sometimes you'll get an error because something else might be running on that port already. The choices are either to kill what's running on 5000 and run this command again, or you can specify another port in the run command. Here's an example of that. So it would be python mflask app hello run. Debug is mentioned here. It helps to specify it because if it isn't run by default, when you make changes to your code, they might not show up in the browser. To specify a port, you can -h for host, and then you can specify the local host, and then -p for port and specify a port. If you run this and then go to localhost :3000, you should see your app. I've done that already. So this is our Hello World app, what you'll see in a browser when that runs. The Quick Start guide goes into many other helpful points. Right at the top, it discusses what each of the lines of our Hello World app do. So first we import Flask, the Flask class, and then we create an instance of that class, and we name it app. That's a industry standard to name it app, but you can name it whatever you want. The first argument is the name of the application's module. So in this case, Thunder name refers to the hello.py file name that we gave this, and so hello is the name of this app. So if you say Thunder name, the value should be hello. This is important to specify this because you need to define this so that Flask knows where to look for everything else it's going to do in the future. We use route. Route is a method in the Flask class. So we define the function hello world, and then we decorate this function with the route method, and we pass to the route method the actual route we want to use if we want to execute this function. Slash is basically just the URL. Most browsers infer that there is a slash after the domain name. You can just go to localhost 3000 or 127.0.0.1, which is the same as localhost, and then port 3000. You don't actually have to put the slash, but you could. The browser just gets rid of it because it's just inferred, and there's our hello world being executed. Quick Start goes into many other pointers, many more things. It's quite lengthy. But for now, we were able to run our Hello app and see it in a browser. And in order to do that, we had to do those steps that we described before. Making a virtual environment, activating the virtual environment, and then install Flask, and then run Flask. That was just a quick review of the project layout. We never really use just one file in an application. Usually applications involve many files. And so instead of just creating a file, we create a package. Package is just like a folder that you put all of the other files in. But if you're going to use a package, you have to define your Flask class a little differently. We see how to do that in the Dunder init in the application setup lesson. We've made another folder called Flaskr, and we've created this Dunder init file in that Flaskr folder. And now, when we import OS and import Flask, instead of just naming an app and assigning it the Flask class, we actually use a function to do that for us. So we're defining a create app function. We're passing it testconfig none, and this is where we create and config the app. So here's that app that we saw in Hello World, and it's using the Flask class and the Dunder name parameter. But now we're going to be giving some configuration information. So here we're setting our configuration for mapping to the database, and here we're loading the instance of config if it exists. Here's some try error exception for the instance path, and then here's our route. And in this case, we're not using just a slash, we're using /hello. And if we were to run this app, we would have to use /hello after the localhost, and then we would see our hello world flash. But we've already read this in the other lesson. Although we didn't actually do that, in the other video, but this is running the application as a package as opposed to running it as a file that we saw before. So we see how the setup is a bit different for running as a package. Alright, so that's just a quick review of the first two lessons, and now we're able to move on to the next lesson, which is continue to define and access the database.